What's going on, everybody? It's ShamefulPenguin here, back with another video. Today we're getting into the cold conversion Stormbrand assassin build. I decided to play in 3.14. This build is very fun. You have a lot of explosions, you're pretty fast overall, and this is kind of the build I want to. I love playstyles that involve farming, running through maps really fast, and can still do a little bit of bossing with enough investment, which this build definitely can. I have killed Awakener 8 Cyrus. I have killed the Shaper Guardians numerous times. I've killed the Elder Guardians a few times. This build can do bosses. I even killed Trial Master with this build. So this build can definitely do bosses with enough investment. There are tons of ways to add DPS to what I have done, but my build is catered toward mapping really fast. And yeah, that's if you like a smooth play style that you just kind of explode everything around you and you place little brands around, then you want to follow this guide. A few key things we're using in this build are cold conversion, and cold conversion is done by the Call of the Brotherhood. Call of the Brotherhood converts lightning damage to cold damage, and this is going to be very effective because we are using Inpulsa's Broken Heart, which allows us to kill enemies, and when they're killed they explode, dealing a portion of their life as lightning damage. And this lightning damage is also converted to cold because of our conversion, and we can also scale it through either lightning damage, AoE, cold damage, whatever we have. So we get a damage scaling with our explosions on top of damage scaling with our Stormbrand, and Stormbrand is naturally a lightning based gem, so we are converting that to cold damage as well, so we can get those nice shatters. Now, since we're converting to cold, we don't implicitly shock enemies anymore. So the way we fix that is using Storm's Gift. And Storm's Gift allows us to, enemies you kill are shocked, so that automatically will proc the Impulse's explosion. On top of that, shocks you and inflicts spread to other enemies. So we prolift the shock, which allows our explosions to essentially chain if you're scaling your explosion damage enough. So it's pretty cool. And we can scale that explosion damage with natural AoE, crit multi, so power charges and frenzy charges, the damage from those also scale explosion damage. So everything kind of works out together. And the way we get power charges is from being an assassin. An assassin allows us to scale power charges and power charge damage. On top of that, we're using 2 void batteries to give us that extra bit of power charge and power charge damage scaling. And then lastly we're using a Badge of the Brotherhood, where Badge of the Brotherhood allows our power charges, maximum power charges, to be set equal to our maximum frenzy charges. So with this build I can get up to 10 power charges. Now I can get up to 10 frenzy charges as well, which is a huge boost in damage. So there's multiple ways to generate frenzy charges. We're generating frenzy charges by using Ice Bite. There's numerous other ways. You can use Frenzy and naturally attack things, or you could use Blood Rage and just have it on kill without sacrificing a gem link, but the gem link is pretty good in my opinion, so I keep it on. Now that we have some of the basics out of the way, let's get into the gem links first. Now, Stormbrand being a lightning skill, we're going to be linking Control Destruction, Awaken added lightning damage, and Power Charge on crit. These are pretty much solid choices for any variation you are choosing. Power Charge on crit can be worse off if you have lower amount of power charges. I have 10 power charges, so Power Charge on crit is giving me the most DPS. If you have something like 7 or 8, you may look into another support gem. Now the last two are the gem choices that you may want to switch depending on your playstyle. I chose Ice Bite and Inspiration. Now Inspiration lowers your mana cost for Stormbrand, so you can cast it more frequently while upkeeping lots of damage. Also Ice Bite, which gives us a good amount of damage, a lot less damage than most other skills, but also gives us frenzy charges on kill. So giving us frenzy charges is a good way to sustain without having to worry about using other skills to maintain your frenzy charges. Now, if you want to opt for higher DPS, you definitely are going to take out Ice Bite, and you can take out Inspiration as well. The two choices that will bring in the most DPS for you are Swift Brand and Conk Effect. Now Conk Effect you can fit in place of any one of these and it will add more DPS. I didn't put in Conk Effect because I like the AoE of the brand latching to enemies. You are sacrificing AoE for Conk Effect, but it is giving you the most DPS. Swift Brand is killing your duration, but making the activation frequency pretty insane. So this gives us the most DPS, but it makes it so your brands die really fast. So you're going to have to keep casting them constantly. So Swift Brand Inspiration is a good combo you can make. And Conk Effect Ice Bite can also work out very well if you're interested in that. But overall, if you're not using Ice Bite, you're going to need to be generating frenzy charges through some source. Now you could use the frenzy skill and cast that, and you can cast it on something like a Hydrosphere or just on enemies with GMP, or have it just use it every once in a while. And you can definitely summon it through that, and you can upkeep it on bosses pretty easily. Or another choice is to use Blood Rage, and Blood Rage will slowly degen your life over time, but it will give you the same effect of Ice Bite where you get frenzy charges on kill. So either one is your choice. Now let's get into the other gem links. Brand Recall is a really good skill that recalls all your brands to your current location, and it will zap all of their uses immediately when they're on you. So if you stand on top of a boss, you have 5 brands active and you cast it, all 5 brands will do its damage at the same time right when you recall. So using this on cooldown when you're fighting bosses is a really good mechanic to increase your DPS. Next, we're using Empower and Second Wind to decrease the cooldown, so increase the cooldown recovery rate of Brand Recall so we can spam it more often. And then we're using a low level Arcane Surge just to upkeep Arcane Surge permanently. Next, we have Wave of Conviction, where we are debuffing the enemy with this. We mostly do cold damage pretty much without trying, so our Wave of Conviction debuff will be cold exposure. And then we are also linking Hex Touch and Frostbite to give a curse on the enemy so we can deal increased cold damage against the enemy. On top of that, we give it Bone Chill just to do a little bit more cold damage to top it off. Next, we got our Cast When Damage Taken setup, which is Immortal Call, Cast When Damage Taken, and Increased Duration. This is just for extra survivability, especially while you're mapping. This comes in handy and saves your life quite a bit. Next, we got our auras, which is Zealotry, Enlighten, and Hatred. If you want to keep both of these up, you're going to need to have Enlighten at least level 2 and have Sovereignty spec'd on your wheel to feel a little bit comfortable with your mana management. Next, we got our movement skill, which is Flame Dash, Second Wind, and Faster Casting, just to move around the map really fast. You can also opt for Dash if that makes you more, if you feel like that is a better playstyle for you. And lastly, we got Vol Discipline. It's basically just our panic button when we are being damaged a lot and we want to just quickly get out of it. We can hit Vol Discipline. Another excellent choice is you can use Vol Haste or Vol Grace, just as extra supplementary damage or survivability. Now we're going to be getting into the gear. I already talked about some of these pieces, but we're going to go back over them just so this is a complete guide. First, we got our weapons, which is 2 Void Batteries. This gives us +1 to max power charges, which is very important for our damage scaling, as well as scale our damage per power charge. Next, we got our helmet. Our helmet, mine is a bit of a work in progress at this moment, but you will want +1 maximum power charges on your helmet if you have some currency. If you don't, just worry about getting life and resistance. If you do have a budget, +1 maximum power charges is the best in slot choice to get on your helmet. If you can also get something like minus cold res to nearby enemies, that will also help your DPS quite a bit. Next, our body armor is in Inpulsa's Broken Heart. Inpulsa's gives us the explosions that we're looking for. It is lightning based, which is really good because our main skill is lightning based. So when we convert our damage, we're also converting the explosions. Our choice of gloves is the Storm's Gift. And this is because we get shock prolif with these gloves that can create some awesome chain explosions with Impulsas. You can also get some pretty cool implicit mods with these gloves if you have a little bit more of a budget to work with. Next, we got the boots. The boots, on a low budget, you're going to just want life and resistance and ES if you can. And on a higher budget, you're going to want to have Tailwind on your boots and any other beneficial mods that will work out for you. I think Tailwind is the best thing you can get for this build, just so you can run faster. Next, we have Badge of the Brotherhood as our amulet. This is how we get our frenzy charge maximum to be equal to our power charges. So since we have 10 power charges, we have 10 frenzy charges, and that's a lot of damage. Next, we got our rings. We have 2 Call of the Brotherhoods. This is how we convert our lightning damage to cold damage. So getting 2 of these qualityed up is really important. Lastly, we have our belt. Our belt is pretty much a placeholder just to fix our resistance and give us a bunch of life. You can swap this out for a headhunter if you are a big boy, but at the moment, a really life-based leather belt is really good just to make it so you're a bit more tanky. My first 2 flask choices are Cinder Swallow and Azir's Promise. Cinder Swallow gives us Onslaught as well as many other great things like Life on Kill, Mana on Kill, and ES on Kill. Next, we have our Azir's Promise. Azir's Promise gives us a bunch of extra damage scaling, and it gives us our life leech when we deal chaos damage, so we get a little bit of survivability off of this. Next, we got our Quicksilver Flask, of course, Diamond Flask, and a Basalt Flask. You're going to want at least one of these to have Freeze Immune, and at least one of these to have Corrupting Blood and Bleed Immune if you are running these flasks. Next, we're going to get into the Cluster Jewels. Now, this is a really important part of the build. Cluster Jewels are what make this build do a lot more damage. Without this, I wouldn't really recommend running this build if you didn't have the option to run Cluster Jewels. Now, the most important jewels are the Medium Cluster Jewels. Medium Cluster Jewels is how we scale a ton of damage, our radius, and all that kind of stuff to make this build super smooth. Now, you're going to want one jewel that has Holy Conquest and another mod. So another mod meaning Grand Design or Brand Loyalty or Remarkable. Holy Conquest allows it so our enemies we attach with the brand, it links to other enemies, so it just spreads that damage really quick. And you only want one Holy Conquest. The rest of your medium jewels, so the other 3, you're going to want to have Grand Design, which is the best in slot notable choice, and Brand Loyalty or Remarkable. And if you can get 3 of those with one of the Holy Conquest setup, you're going to be doing pretty good in this build. Now for the large cluster jewels, you're going to want cold damage cluster jewels, and you're going to want Blanketed Snow and Snowstorm. Those 2 give us our damage pen against cold enemies and lightning damage as extra cold damage against chilled enemies. So this gives us a bunch of extra damage that we can scoop up and kill things faster. Next, as the last choice on it, just get Widespread Destruction or Doriani's as your choice of the 3rd for the suffix slot. And you're going to want to have a 8 passive, of course, large cluster jewel, just to minimize your passive points. Next, we're going to get into the actual jewels. So we're going to get into a unique jewel that we're using, Glorious Vanity. Now, Glorious Vanity is really good, and we're using Doriani because we want Corrupted Soul. Corrupted Soul gives us 50% non-chaos damage, bypasses Energy Shield, but we're getting 15% max life as extra max ES, and this gives us a bunch of extra survivability. You can opt for a different timeless jewel that gives you, one of them gives you power charge, more power charge damage, I believe, but you can't generate frenzy charges, something like that. And you can scale damage more with this, but I went for the survivability because I figured we have enough damage. I can already kill Shaper Guardians and stuff like that. Why not go and opt into survivability instead? Another unique jewel we're going to want is a Watcher's Eye. Now, don't worry about it if you can't get this, but we're going to want the damage penetrates cold resistance while affected by hatred. Hatred gives us a lot of extra damage, and then we're getting cold damage pen, so we do a lot of extra damage on top of that. Another unique jewel you can opt for is the Transcendent Flesh, which will give you a ton of extra damage, but it is pretty expensive, and I don't think it's overall worth it, but if you have the money to burn, why not use it? It's going to be helpful for your crit multi. Now, the rest of the jewels I'm using currently are just regular jewels, non-abyss jewels, and we just basically look for life, resistance, and crit strike multiplier. Now crit strike multiplier gives us a ton of extra damage, so if you can get this on every jewel, it will be scaling your damage very well. You can also get things like cast speed, and a corrupted blood and silence immune jewel with implicit is also really helpful. Now jewels are actually a place on this build that you're going to need a lot of resistance, so keep that in mind when you're making this build, because pretty much every jewel I'm using, except for like maybe 1 or 2, have resistance on them, so I can get resistance cap. Because this build uses so many uniques, this is a spot in this build that is a little lacking, but just slapping in extra jewels fixed it for me, and that's what I ended up doing. Now we're going to get into our Ascendency choices. Now we opted as a Shadow to go Assassin for our Ascendency. Assassin allows us to scale a lot of extra crit damage and power charge scaling, so we can do a lot of extra damage. Now the first Ascendency choice I would recommend is Mistwalker, so we can get elusive and level up quicker. Next is going to be Unstable Infusion, which gives us power charges and an extra power charge, and then Deadly Infusion, which gives us a bunch of extra damage per power charge. Lastly, we're going to choose Opportunistic as our Uber Lab choice, because it gives us more damage, and it gives us a reduced damage as well, so we have more survivability. Now we're going to be getting into our passive tree. Now I'm going to say this first: if you are confused by this passive tree, please go watch my leveling guide and my leveling build and my low budget Stormbrand Assassin build. That's all leveling stuff. That's all budget leveling, how you build your character. If you want to do red maps with Stormbrand, you can easily do it with that build. Now if you have a budget, I would say about 10x, this is the build you're going to want to start with, and you're going to want to change your tree into what you see here, because we are maximizing our cluster jewels as much as possible. Now it's necessary for us to have 2 cluster jewels, 2 large cluster jewels and 4 medium to maximize our damage. You can opt for a 3rd, but that's stretching your tree a little too thin in my opinion, but it would give you more damage. Now, yeah, so if you want to follow this tree, basically the essence of it is that we want to scale crit multi and life as much as possible. We are taking Runebinder, which is a really important node, and we're also taking Sovereignty, so we can have our 2 big auras to maximize our DPS. And we're getting every power charge node we can on the tree. Our bandit choice is Kill All. This is because we want as many passive points we can invest in our cluster jewels, and we had to scrape away a lot of points to make sure that we can land both of them comfortably. Now for the Pantheon choices, I chose Lunaris and Garakan. This is because movement speed. I don't think there's another choice basically. As for the leveling tips, you can go check my 10-part series I made previously where I played this exact build, just the generic lightning version though, where I leveled this build from Act 1 to Act 10 with you guys. It's the Leveling with Penguin series. I highly suggest you guys check that out if you're interested on how I leveled this character. And that's pretty much a wrap for this video. Thank you to everyone that got this far in the video. Please leave a like and a sub down below. I really appreciate it. I put a lot of work into this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it more than my other build videos, and I hope to be pushing out more content for you guys. Anyways, thanks for checking out this video, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. Later.